Here's another video on India. 1.4. What other factors influenced the rise of nationalism? World War I and World War II were very, very important, but what else contributed to Indian independence? What were some of the things that inspired these nationalists? Well, after the war, India really helped out in World War II, especially in the Allied war effort. So they sent a whole bunch of troops across the war. So they're fighting the Nazis in North Africa. They're fighting the Nazis and the Italians in Italy. They're fighting the Japanese in Burma. And so they're fighting across the planet. The Indian economy is also a huge factor in that they become the largest steel producer for the entire British Empire, because the British Empire is fallen apart, being bombed out. And India is largely not bombed out, and so they're able to produce steel unencumbered. India was in debt to the UK to kind of build up India before the war, but the UK borrowed a whole bunch of money for the war to fight off the Nazis, so that by the end of the war, the UK actually becomes in debt to India by 1945. And so they helped out in massive ways when it comes to men and money. And then we get a nasty little famine in 1943, the Bengal famine, which wasn't really a famine. This was very man-made. Bengal, highly populated area, the capital of old British Empire. And usually they got a lot of their food from Burma. However, Burma was taken by Japan, so the usual food they got from there, that's not going to work out. And so they had to grow their own food that year. And the crops actually did pretty well that year. But the army needed food. And so the UK decided to send a lot of the food from Bengal to their troops in North Africa, Italy, and Burma. And so the food that would have fed the people of Bengal is taken by the Japanese, and then is taken by the UK, resulting in 2 million deaths in the Bengal province. And so they're going to be pretty angry at the British about this, and that they've just lost 2 million people. They helped out in the war. It's time for independence. And plus, they start to really stand on their own. The war caused a lot of increased industrialization. Bombay or Mumbai became an industrial center for light engineering, pharmaceuticals, chemicals. So they're really starting to stand on their own. They can feed themselves. They're growing their own industries. England owes them money. So things are starting to really change. So a couple cartoons here. We've got the INC, and we've got the Muslim League. They're starting to unite against the Brits. They're pretty angry. And then famine comes along as well. And so they're all united to take down the Brits. As the Brits start to show up and say, hey, we're ready to give in to some of those demands. They want it all. And so the British are ready to give in to whatever they want because they really helped out. Another cartoon down bottom, British clear out. They free India from British tyranny. And they're just surrounded by death in Bengal. And at this point, it's time. They're ready for that independence. The British economy was destroyed. And to have their empire, they needed to have a strong military presence to keep control of their empire. And they just couldn't afford that anymore. London was bombed out by the Blitz. They spent all their money fighting Hitler. And so they can't afford to send their troops across the planet. Maintaining their empire is just way too expensive. So it's time to kind of give up the empire. It's just no longer worth it to send over troops for millions of dollars to get millions of dollars in trade benefits in return. Just when it comes to the cost-benefit analysis, it's not working anymore. And they can't afford to send the troops in the first place. Plus, the UK made all these big promises that if you help us out in the war, we're going to give you independence. So it's time to pay up. And so here's what their empire looked like in 1945, starting to shrink piece by piece. And they just can't afford to send their troops there anymore. So they promised that Dominion status at the end of the war, and it's time for them to gain that independence. And so these were some of the other factors that influenced the rise of nationalism, largely a result of World War II. World War II is hugely influential in their cause for independence.